Hey everybody. I'm going to record some thoughts on the homework so that you can have another resource while you're either going through the homework on your own or um, even in class when we get into our groups, just so you've got another resource. Okay, I know sometimes in class we don't get to talk about all of the concepts in 90 minutes, it's really hard. So, this this is an attempt to cover all, if not most, most if not all of the unit. So I'm gonna just jump right in. I'm gonna try to split this up into two videos, where with the Unit 4 Day 1, I'm gonna try to split it up into the basic principles and then the I, because they can be both by themselves can be a little bit. So this will be the first one. This will be everything from the intro to sensation and perception all the way up to where it starts talking about the eye. So let's kind of jump right in. Now, what I'm doing, you can't see my screen, um, but I am looking at the ebook right now. I have it open, and I'm just going to start from the beginning, and I'm gonna briefly talk about these concepts, and I'm going to go through them. If there's anything that you don't really like, that I'm going to point out some things that may be a little bit unnecessary to spend a lot of time on. So let's first jump into sensation. Now, it gives you the sensation and perception words right up front, but what's actually going to happen is we're going to split this unit in half. We're going to talk about sensation for 2 days, and then we're going to talk about perception for 2 days. So right at the beginning, if you read the intro to the unit, it's going to talk about how we there's a couple words that you need to understand. It's going to talk about how we interpret or how we sense and then how we interpret stimuli. So if you don't know what the word stimuli is, what that means is anything that can be detected by your five senses. So anything that you see, anything that you smell, taste, touch, hear, all of that is considered to be stimuli. So my voice right now is stimuli or a stimulus if you want to use the singular version. The screen is the light waves is stimuli. Okay, the light in your room, stimuli. Okay, the touch sensations that you feel, stimuli. Taste, smell, all that. Okay, so sensation, and I'm gonna kind of focus just on sensation, is detecting. So it's got quite a long. Let's see what this definition is. Is that one? Yeah, the process by which our sensory receptors and nervous system receive and represent, there's that word, stimulus energies from our environment. So what I want you to think of with sensation is just detecting. So imagine all five of your senses. It could be light waves. It could be a scent. It could be a taste. It could be a sound. Okay, that you sensing that you're using your five senses is what we're going to think about with sensation. And I've had a lot of questions already about bottom up and top down processing. Um, let's leave top down for when we get to perception, but really what you want to do is be able to pair these. So you want to pair bottom up with sensation and pair top down with perception. So bottom up processing is when you start with your sensory receptors. So like your fingers have lots of sensory receptors. Your nose has a sensory receptor. So bottom up processing is simply explaining the process of sensation. It's explaining detecting stimuli. Okay, we're going to try not to overthink it too much. In perception, a good word. I know I said we'd leave it for later, but perception is going to be interpreting. Perception is interpreting, and sensation is detecting. So there's a pretty cool image right here, Figure 4.1, with the horses and the men and the faces actually and the rocks. So um, it kind of talks about the difference between sensation and perception. Sensation would be us detecting that we see some colors, we see some lines. We can, we're sending that information to the brain. We're detecting it. Okay, and then what the brain does is the brain interprets and goes, "Whoa, that's a horse. That's a wow. Look at those rocks. That actually kind of looks like a face." So the brain is all about interpreting based on prior knowledge. The brain is very judgmental too, so the brain is gonna judge. But with sensation, it's just detecting. Okay, let's go on to the next page. So now we're at selective attention. So how are we affected by selective attention? This is super cool, and this is going to be really relevant in your life. We kind of talked about this a little bit when I was showing you how to do your new notes. Selective attention is your conscious awareness on one thing at a time. Believe it or not, there is a myth that you can multitask, and you really can't multitask. You're actually switching from one thing to the next very quickly. So selective attention is just you focus. You're think about the words. You're selecting something that you're giving your attention to. Okay, so maybe right now, my voice, this video, it has your selective attention. It's your conscious awareness. So think about what's going to be paired with selective attention is blindness, and not just because you can't see, but like things that you're not aware of because you're so focused on one thing. Okay, um, there's this word right here, the cocktail party effect. All right, I'm not sure if this is a bold term, but this is one you want to know. Cocktail party effect, kind of, um, what it does is it's your imagine you're it's named because it's like a cocktail party. People are hanging out, people are talking, it's very loud, but all of a sudden you hear this one voice out of dozens of voices, and it draws your attention to it. Well, usually if they say your name, that's going to take your attention to it. So you tune in, or maybe you hear something that kind of grabs your attention. But the cocktail party effect is when you are able to tune everything else out and just hear one voice. And a lot of times the questions that will be asked will be somebody calls your name. So I'm sure you can imagine that you've been engrossed in a conversation before, and then someone has said something and drawn your attention away, and you can actually pay attention to what they're saying, even though there's a bunch of other people talking around you. Just like at a cocktail party, people are focused on one thing, but there's lots of noise going on. Okay, here's your PSA if you keep going down about how distracted we can be while driving. And that is because of selective attention. Okay, when you are driving and on your phone, you're switching from one thing to another. You're not looking at the road and texting, or even being on the phone can be distracting. Even looking down to turn up the radio, choosing a song on your phone, talking to a friend, being distracted by the back seat. You are taking your attention away from a missile, basically, a metal missile flying down the road to look at something else. And in that split second, I mean, people don't believe it, but something this is how I always explain it. When you're distracted and driving, everything's cool when nothing unexpected happens. So when you reach down to text and everything's okay, you kind of reinforce this behavior that you can do that. And so what happens is you continue to do it, and you get a little cocky, you get overconfident that, oh, I'm such a good driver, I can be on my phone. But what's happening is, just coincidentally, the universe is not throwing anything unexpected at you. So what happens when an animal runs out in front of you and you're texting? That's where you're going to see that attention deficit right there. That's where the consequence is going to be. It's going to be when something unexpected happens, or a cyclist pulls out, or a little kid crossing the street. Okay, those are those times where you're going to notice that your attention's not on the road. And a lot of times our natural instinct is to do something, a knee-jerk reaction, and swerve, or to do something, or maybe you don't even see something, and then that's when these things happen. So if you are distracted sometimes by your phone when you drive and nothing bad has happened, I guarantee you need to add, and this sounds, you need to add the word yet, because nothing bad has happened yet, but it will. So please use this information right here to help you realize that you can't drive distracted. So what kind of pairs up with selective attention is something called inattentional blindness. So this is going to be what you miss because you are so focused on one thing. So right now, maybe you're focused on this video. You're focused on trying to get your AP Psych stuff done. Well, think about all the stuff that's going on around you that you don't even know what's happening. So this could be, there's a video that we're going to watch in class that we're going to test your inattentional blindness. You might have already seen it before, but I got a couple good videos for that. Change blindness, this is actually the video, it's about change blindness, is when something in your environment changes and you fail to notice it, okay? It could be because you are so focused on one thing, but think about like if you're having like dinner with somebody and you switch out their drink and like they don't even notice that the cup has changed or something like that. It's just because you're not focused on that. You just don't know that it's changed. So this little figure 4.3 right here, we're actually going to watch a video where this happens, where people actually trade places with somebody trying to give directions, and the person they kind of pick on has no idea that the person has even changed, even though they're wearing different clothing. They even get to the point where they switch out. It's a person of a different with a different skin color, and the person has no idea because they just they're not paying attention. You don't realize how much you're not paying attention to people that come up and talk to you, people that are in your everyday life. You just don't. We kind of fail to recognize some of these things. So that's kind of a good place to kind of stop and check up on how you're doing with some of those basic phenomena. Now, the next thing, I'm going to try to do this one, try to keep this at about 15 minutes. The next thing we're going to talk about are thresholds. So I'm at that big heading of thresholds. Now, I'm going to skip psychophysics. I've never heard that word, seen it on a test before. So I'm going to go right down to absolute thresholds. So let's think about the word threshold. Threshold is when you cross over into something. Like when you go through a door, you're crossing a threshold. When a neuron is building that electricity, that energy, it's reaching a threshold before it fires. Okay, you have a threshold for pain. Whenever the pain gets to be high enough and you can't take it anymore, that's that threshold. Some people have a patience threshold, right? You can handle it, but if it gets right here, you lose it. Okay, so an absolute threshold is going to be the smallest amount of stimuli, or the minimum amount of stimuli it takes for you to detect something with your senses. So for example, my absolute threshold for vision could be tested by, like, on a dark, clear night, maybe I'm looking out into the ocean and I see a light suddenly flash. Well, that light is a ship. That ship has probably been coming my direction for a while, but I just now noticed it when it got close enough. That's my absolute threshold. Maybe there's always think about like a concert going on. There's a concert going on outdoors somewhere in this in the state, in the city of Charlotte, but you don't hear it until you get close enough. That point that you hear it, that's your absolute threshold. Same thing, you might not smell something until you get close to where that source of the odor is. You may not taste something unless it's got enough of a flavor. Okay, so that point that you detect it is the absolute threshold. So I always tell, it's kind of cheesy, but you could tell yourself, I absolutely see that now where I didn't before, or I absolutely can hear that. Okay, so a lot of students get that confused with the difference threshold. All right, signal detection theory. Let's move on to this one. This gives students trouble, but it's really not that complicated. And I'm going to try to help you see if you can understand it. So signal detection theory it states the expectations. So if we're or if we're motivated, or if we happen to be like super alert or awake, what that can do is that can actually change our absolute thresholds. It can actually lower our absolute thresholds. So, for example, a lot of people are surprised that what I can hear in class when I'm standing up front. So I'm expecting sometimes students to be talking, and maybe I can hear it better because I'm expecting you to do that. Another example is if you're expecting a text message, you might actually feel your phone vibrate or hear it when it's farther out of your range than you normally would if you weren't expecting it. Also, think of like a mother that has just had a baby, a newborn baby. The absolute threshold for hearing might be lowered because they're expecting the baby to be crying. So they could be in like a really loud, maybe some friends are over downstairs and all of a sudden the mother's like, I hear the baby crying. And everybody's like, what baby's crying? And then they go upstairs and the baby is crying. Now, the only problem with this is sometimes our expectations can lead to false positives where we think that we hear something, but we don't. I'm sure you have felt a phantom vibration of your phone in your pocket because you're expecting somebody to always be texting you or whatever, or maybe your social media account is popping off and you're just waiting for it, but then you check it a couple times and it's like, oh, no one actually did text me. So that's signal detection theory. It's when your absolute threshold can be lowered because of expectations or motivations. Okay, I'm almost at 15, so I'm actually going to stop and I'm going to do subliminal and just difference on the iVideo.